Maya had always believed that life could change in a single moment. 3 years ago, she learned this lesson the hardest way possible. The kitchen fire that swept through her apartment had taken more than just her belongings. It had taken her confidence, her career as a fashion photographer, and most painfully, her ability to look at herself in the mirror without flinching. Now, she spent her days behind a computer screen, editing photos for other photographers who could still face the world without covering their arms with long sleeves, even in summer. Her small apartment felt like a fortress where she could control every detail, every shadow, every angle of light that might reveal what she preferred to keep hidden. The scars weren't just on her skin. They lived in her mind too, replaying that terrible night over and over. She had tried therapy, support groups, and countless remedies, but nothing seemed to quiet the voice that whispered she was broken, damaged, someone to be pitied rather than loved. On a rainy Tuesday morning, everything shifted again. The lawyer's call came just as Maya was finishing her third cup of coffee, trying to find energy for another day of hiding behind her computer. "Miss Rodriguez, I have some unexpected news about your grandmother's estate," the voice on the phone said. It appears she owned property that wasn't mentioned in the original will. A cabin by Clearwater Lake, about 3 hours north of the city. Maya nearly dropped her coffee. Her grandmother had never mentioned any lake property. In fact, she barely remembered the woman who had lived so far away and visited so rarely. They had exchanged maybe a dozen conversations in Maya's entire life. "Are you certain it's mine?" Maya asked, her heart beginning to race with a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Hope, maybe, or at least curiosity. "The deed is clear and there are no other living relatives listed. The property has been maintained by a local caretaker service, paid from a trust fund your grandmother established. You're free to visit any time, or we can arrange to sell it if you prefer." That night, Maya found herself staring out her apartment window at the busy street below. People walked past with such easy confidence, their faces unguarded, their bodies moving through space without the constant awareness of how others might see them. She envied their freedom, their ability to exist without calculating every interaction, every public appearance. The idea of the lake house grew in her mind like a seed finding water. Maybe a change of scenery could help her heal in ways that staying in the city never could. Maybe being alone, truly alone, without neighbors who might stare or delivery drivers who might glimpse her scars, would give her the space she needed to figure out who she was now. 2 weeks later, Maya loaded her car with everything that mattered. Her camera equipment, though she hadn't used it in months. Her laptop and editing software. Enough clothes for a summer, all long-sleeved and high-necked. And a small box of photo albums from her life before the fire. Pictures she couldn't bear to look at but couldn't bring herself to throw away. The drive north took her through changing landscape, from city blocks to suburbs to rolling hills and finally to dense forest that seemed to whisper secrets as she passed. With each mile, she felt something loosening in her chest, as if she were driving away from a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. When she finally saw Clearwater Lake spread out below her like a mirror reflecting the sky, Maya had to pull over just to breathe. The beauty was overwhelming. Crystal clear water stretched for miles, surrounded by pine trees that seemed to touch the clouds. It was the kind of place people dreamed of escaping to, the kind of place that appeared in movies about starting over. Her grandmother's cabin sat on a small rise overlooking the water. It was modest but charming, with a wraparound porch and large windows that would fill the rooms with natural light. The caretaker had left a note explaining that the utilities were connected and the refrigerator was stocked with basics. As Maya carried her belongings inside, she noticed something she hadn't felt in years. Excitement. The cabin felt like possibility. Here she could walk around in short sleeves if she wanted. She could sit on the porch without worrying about strangers' eyes. She could maybe, just maybe, remember what it felt like to be comfortable in her own skin. That first evening, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun set over the lake. The water turned gold, then pink, then deep purple as day became night. For the first time in 3 years, Maya didn't spend the evening editing other people's photographs. Instead, she just watched the world change colors around her. She noticed a few other cabins scattered along the shoreline, most with lights glowing warmly in their windows. The closest neighbor was about a quarter-mile away, far enough to ensure privacy but close enough to provide comfort that she wasn't completely isolated. Smoke rose from one chimney and she wondered briefly about the person who lived there. Did they come here to escape something too? Or were they one of those lucky people who had never needed to run from their own reflection? As the stars began to appear, Maya made herself a promise. This summer would be different. This summer, she would try to remember who she used to be before the fire changed everything. Maybe she would even pick up her camera again. Start seeing beauty in the world instead of just processing it on a computer screen for other people. She had no idea that her closest neighbor was someone whose life had been shattered by a different kind of fire, a professional disaster that had left him as isolated and guarded as she was. She had no idea that within days she would come face to face with a man whose skills might have changed her story entirely. If only their paths had crossed 3 years earlier. That night, Maya slept better than she had in months, lulled by the gentle sound of water lapping against the shore. Outside her window, the lake reflected moonlight like scattered diamonds, and in a cabin not far away, another sleepless soul carved wood by lamplight, both of them unknowingly beginning a summer that would challenge everything they thought they knew about healing, courage, and the possibility of starting over. The morning would bring their first encounter, a simple meeting at the local store that would set in motion a series of events neither of them could predict. But for now they both slept peacefully. Two wounded souls separated by water and darkness, each carrying secrets that would soon intertwine in ways they never imagined possible. Maya's first week at the lake passed quietly. She had settled into a routine of morning coffee on the porch, afternoon walks along the shore, and evenings spent organizing her grandmother's belongings. The cabin was full of surprises. Old photo albums, handwritten recipes, and letters that revealed a woman Maya had never really known. On Thursday morning, she realized she needed supplies. The nearest store was a 15-minute drive through winding forest roads to a small town called Pine Ridge. The general store looked like something from a movie, with wooden floors that creaked and shelves packed with everything from fishing gear to fresh bread. Maya kept her sleeves pulled down and her head low as she gathered what she needed. Milk, bread, coffee, and some basic cleaning supplies. She was reaching for laundry detergent when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Excuse me, could you grab that box of cereal from the top shelf?" She turned and froze. Standing 3 feet away was a man she recognized immediately, though she had never met him in person. Dr. Alex Chen, the plastic surgeon whose research she had read obsessively 3 years ago. The one whose assistant had politely declined her case over the phone, saying the doctor was no longer taking new patients. He didn't recognize her at first. Why would he? He had never seen her face, only the photos her previous doctors had sent. But Maya knew him from medical journal articles, conference videos, and the newspaper stories about his downfall. "Maya Rodriguez," she said quietly, watching his expression change as the name registered. "You probably don't remember, but your office received my case files 3 years ago." The color drained from his face. She could see him putting the pieces together. The timeline, the type of injuries, the desperate calls from other doctors seeking his expertise. His hands, which had been reaching for a box of crackers, fell to his sides. "I remember," he said softly. "The kitchen fire case. Complex scarring pattern across the torso and arms. Your surgeon wanted to consult on revision techniques, and you said no." The words came out sharper than Maya had intended. 3 years of anger and disappointment were suddenly right there at the surface. You were developing some new procedure that could have helped, but you weren't taking new cases. Alex looked around the small store, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation happening in such a public space. Old Mrs. Peterson behind the counter was pretending not to listen, but Maya could see her ears practically straining in their direction. "It wasn't that simple," Alex said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The technique was experimental. The medical board was already investigating my methods. I couldn't risk—" "You couldn't risk what? Helping someone who needed it?" Maya's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Do you have any idea what these 3 years have been like? Do you know what it's like to live in your own skin when your own skin feels like a prison?" The store had gone completely quiet now. Even Mrs. Peterson had stopped pretending to organize the magazine rack. Alex's jaw tightened and Maya could see something flash in his eyes. Guilt, anger, maybe both. "You think I don't know about living in prison?" he said, his professional calm cracking. "You think losing everything I worked for my entire career was easy? You think watching a patient die because I tried to save them with an untested procedure was something I just got over?" Maya felt like she'd been slapped. She had read about the case that ended his career, but hearing the pain in his voice made it real in a way that newspaper articles never could. A 7-year-old boy with burns similar to hers, a desperate attempt to save him using Alex's innovative technique. A successful surgery followed by unexpected complications, a child's death and a doctor's destroyed reputation. "I'm sorry," she said, the fight going out of her as quickly as it had come. "I didn't know about the child. I spent so long thinking you could have helped me and you chose not to." "I chose not to risk your life the way I risked his," Alex said quietly. "Some days I wonder if that was the right choice. Other days I know it was the only choice I could live with." They stood there for a moment, two people carrying different kinds of scars, neither sure what to say next. Finally, Maya picked up her basket and headed for the counter. As she paid for her groceries, she could feel Alex's eyes on her, but she didn't turn around. The drive back to the cabin felt longer than usual. Maya's hands shook slightly as she gripped the steering wheel, processing what had just happened. She had imagined confronting Dr. Chen hundreds of times over the past 3 years. But she had never imagined it would feel like this, complicated and painful and somehow incomplete. That evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sun set over the lake, she noticed smoke coming from the chimney of the nearest cabin. She had wondered about her neighbor all week, and now she knew. The man who might have changed her life lived less than a quarter mile away, close enough that she could probably walk there in 5 minutes. The next few days passed in awkward awareness. Maya found herself checking the windows before going out to her porch, not wanting another unexpected encounter. She saw Alex once, splitting wood behind his cabin, his movements precise and controlled even in this simple task. She ducked back inside before he could see her watching. The storm came on Tuesday night, sudden and fierce in the way mountain storms sometimes do. Maya woke to the sound of something heavy hitting her roof, followed by the crash of breaking glass. When she looked outside, she saw that a large pine branch had fallen across her driveway, blocking her car and smashing through the kitchen window. The power went out around midnight. Maya spent the rest of the night listening to the wind howl and rain pour through her broken window, using towels and a plastic tarp to try to minimize the damage. When morning finally came, she surveyed the destruction with a sinking heart. The branch was far too heavy for her to move alone, and with no cell service and no electricity, she felt truly stranded. That's when she heard the chainsaw. Through her remaining windows, she could see Alex working methodically to clear fallen branches from the road between their cabins. He had already removed several smaller trees and was working on the large pine that blocked Maya's driveway. She watched him work, noting the careful way he approached each cut, the safety equipment he wore, the respectful way he handled the tree that had probably been growing for decades. When he finished cutting the branch into manageable pieces, he looked toward her cabin and saw her watching from the window. For a moment, they just looked at each other across the distance. Then he raised his hand in a small wave and pointed toward the pile of cut wood, as if asking permission to move it. Maya opened her front door and stepped onto the porch. "Thank you," she called across the yard. "I couldn't have moved that myself." "The power lines are down about a mile up the road," Alex called back. "Probably won't have electricity back until tomorrow at the earliest. Do you have enough food and water?" The practical concern in his voice caught her off guard. After their confrontation at the store, she had expected continued awkwardness, maybe even hostility. Instead, he sounded like what he was, a man who had spent years taking care of people, even if he was no longer allowed to do it officially. "I'm okay for now," she said, "but my kitchen window is broken. I'm not sure what to do about that." Alex looked at the damaged window and then back at her. "I have some plywood and tools. I could patch it temporarily until you can get it properly fixed." Maya hesitated. Accepting his help felt like crossing a line, moving from strangers who happened to share a painful history to something more complicated. But the practical reality was that she needed the help, and he was offering it freely. "I would appreciate that," she said finally. Working together to board up the window created a strange intimacy. They didn't talk much, but Maya found herself studying Alex's hands as he measured and cut the plywood. They were surgeon's hands, steady, precise, gentle even when handling rough materials. She wondered what it must be like to have hands trained to heal and no longer be allowed to use them for their intended purpose. "You're good at this," she said as he lined up the final piece of plywood. "I've had a lot of practice these past 2 years," Alex said with a bitter smile. "Turns out there's always something that needs fixing when you're hiding from the world." The admission hung between them. Maya realized that Alex understood her isolation in a way few people could. They were both refugees from their former lives, both learning to exist in the spaces between who they used to be and who they might become. When the work was finished, Maya surprised herself by inviting Alex to stay for lunch. She had soup and bread, nothing fancy, but it felt important to offer something in return for his help. They ate by the light from her remaining windows, the cabin feeling cozier somehow with the storm damage patched and another person sharing the space. "I want you to know," Alex said as they finished eating. "I think about your case sometimes. Wonder what might have happened if I had taken it. Whether I could have helped without the complications that—" He didn't finish the sentence. "And I want you to know," Maya replied, "that I understand why you couldn't. I was angry for a long time, but I get it now. You were protecting me from something worse than scars." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind die down outside. Maya realized that this was the longest conversation she had had with anyone in months, and certainly the most honest. There was something about Alex that made her feel less alone, less like the only person in the world carrying invisible wounds. When he finally left, Maya felt the cabin's emptiness differently than before. Not just empty, but waiting for something to fill it again. 2 weeks had passed since the storm brought Maya and Alex together. What started as neighborly help had grown into something deeper. Afternoon conversations over coffee, shared meals when the evening felt too quiet, and long walks around the lake where they talked about everything, except the obvious tension that hung between them. Maya found herself looking forward to these moments more than she wanted to admit. Alex had a way of listening that made her feel heard without being pitied. He never stared at her covered arms or asked intrusive questions about her scars. Instead, he talked about books, about the wildlife around the lake, about his woodworking projects that kept his hands busy when his mind wandered to darker places. But Maya could see the sadness in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. She watched him from her kitchen window sometimes, sitting on his porch with his hands folded, staring out at the water with the weight of the world on his shoulders. She recognized that look because she wore it herself most days. One afternoon, Maya decided to return Alex's kindness by bringing him some cookies she had baked. As she approached his cabin, she heard an unusual sound coming from inside, a steady rhythm, like someone working with precise, repetitive motions. The front door was slightly open, and she could hear Alex talking to himself, counting under his breath. Curious, she peered through the gap in the door and froze at what she saw. Alex stood at a workbench, completely focused on a piece of synthetic material stretched across a frame. In his hands were surgical instruments, and he was practicing sutures with the same concentration she imagined he once brought to operating rooms. The movements were beautiful in their precision, each stitch perfect, each motion controlled and purposeful, but it was what surrounded him that took Maya's breath away. The entire workshop was set up like a medical training facility. Models of human anatomy, textbooks open to pages about reconstructive techniques, and photographs of before and after surgical results covered every surface. This wasn't just a hobby or a way to pass time. This was a man keeping his skills sharp for a purpose he might never fulfill again. Maya stepped back, her heart pounding. She had interrupted something deeply private, but she couldn't unsee what she had witnessed. Alex wasn't just hiding from the world. He was preparing for the day he might be able to help people again, even if that day might never come. She was about to leave quietly when her elbow bumped against the door, making it creak. Alex looked up and their eyes met through the gap. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Alex set down his instruments and walked to the door. "How long have you been watching?" he asked quietly. "Not long," Maya said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. "I brought cookies, but I didn't want to interrupt. I should go." "No, please," Alex said, opening the door wider. "Come in. I know how this must look." Maya stepped into the workshop, her eyes taking in the full scope of what Alex had created. It was like a shrine to the career he had lost, but also a promise to the future he still hoped for. "You never stopped practicing," she said. Not really a question. "I couldn't," Alex admitted. "I know I might never operate again, but if the chance ever came to help someone, I wanted to be ready. I wanted to be better than I was before." Maya walked slowly around the workshop, looking at the anatomical models, the practice materials, the detailed notes in Alex's careful handwriting. She stopped at a desk covered with research papers and photographs. Among them, she saw images of scars similar to her own, treatment plans and innovative techniques she didn't understand but somehow felt were important. "Is this what you were working on before?" she asked, pointing to a folder marked with complex medical terminology. Alex nodded. "Advanced tissue reconstruction using modified microsurgery techniques. It was supposed to help people with extensive scarring achieve better results with less risk. But after what happened with the child..." He didn't finish the sentence, but Maya understood. The technique that might have helped her had died with a 7-year-old boy whose parents had trusted Alex to save their son. Maya stood there for a long moment, absorbing everything she was seeing and feeling. Here was a man who had lost everything because he tried to push the boundaries of medicine to help people like her. Here was someone who understood better than anyone what it meant to live with the consequences of a single moment that changed everything. "I came here for you, nothing else," she said suddenly, the words coming from a place of truth she hadn't accessed in years. Alex looked confused. "What do you mean?" Maya's hands moved to the hem of her long-sleeved shirt. For 3 years, she had hidden her scars from everyone, doctors, friends, even herself when possible. But standing in this workshop, surrounded by evidence of Alex's dedication to helping people heal, she felt something shift inside her. "I didn't come to the lake house for peace or healing," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I came here because somehow I needed to find you. I needed to understand why you couldn't help me. And now I need you to see what you couldn't fix." Before fear could stop her, Maya pulled her shirt over her head, letting it fall to the floor. She stood there in the afternoon light streaming through the workshop windows, her scars fully visible for the first time in years. The keloid tissue stretched across her torso and arms like a map of the night that had changed her life forever. Alex's intake of breath was sharp, but not from disgust or pity. It was the reaction of a professional seeing a complex case, combined with the response of a man understanding the courage it took for her to stand there exposed and unafraid. "Maya," he whispered, his eyes taking in the full extent of her injuries with the practiced assessment of a surgeon. "This is remarkable, remarkable." Maya almost laughed. "That's not usually how people describe them." "No, you don't understand," Alex said, moving closer but keeping a respectful distance. "These scars tell a story of incredible healing. Your body fought so hard to repair itself. The pattern here, the way the tissue formed, you survived something that should have..." He stopped himself, but Maya could see what he was thinking. She should have died that night. The fact that she was standing here, breathing and whole despite everything, was its own kind of miracle. Standing in Alex's workshop with her scars exposed to daylight for the first time in 3 years, Maya felt something she hadn't expected. Not shame or vulnerability, but a strange kind of relief. It was as if she had been holding her breath for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe normally. Alex moved around her slowly, his trained eyes taking in every detail of her healing. But his approach wasn't clinical or cold. There was reverence in the way he observed her scars, as if he understood that each mark represented not just damage, but survival. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her arm. Maya nodded, and Alex gently traced the edge of a particularly thick scar with one finger. His touch was professional but somehow comforting, the hands of someone who had spent years learning to heal rather than harm. "This formation here," he said quietly, "shows your body's natural ability to rebuild itself. And this pattern along your shoulder, the way the skin adapted and stretched, it's actually quite beautiful from a medical perspective." "Beautiful isn't exactly how I see it," Maya said, but without the bitterness she usually felt when discussing her scars. "That's because you've been looking at them as evidence of damage," Alex said, stepping back to meet her eyes. "But what I see is evidence of strength. Every scar is proof that your body refused to give up, that it fought to keep you alive and functional." They stood there for a moment. Maya's arms crossed over her chest, but not in shame, more like someone finally comfortable with taking up space in the world. "I've been thinking," Alex said carefully. "There are treatments we could try. Not surgery, but other approaches. Laser therapy, specialized massage techniques, some newer topical treatments. Nothing that would require me to practice medicine illegally, but things that might help with flexibility and appearance." Maya looked at him with surprise. "You would do that? Even though you can't officially practice?" "I know people," Alex said. "Good doctors who could supervise the treatments while I provided guidance. My former colleague, Dr. Patricia Wang, has been asking me to consult on complex cases. She believes I have knowledge that shouldn't be wasted because of past mistakes. Over the following weeks, Maya found herself thinking about Alex's offer constantly. But more than that, she found herself thinking about the way she had felt in his workshop. Exposed but not vulnerable, seen but not judged. It was a feeling she wanted to experience more often. She began taking short walks without her long sleeves, letting the lake breeze touch her arms directly. The first time felt terrifying, but each subsequent walk became easier. She even started sitting on her porch in the mornings with her arms uncovered, drinking coffee and watching the water change colors with the rising sun. Alex, meanwhile, had begun reaching out to his old contacts in the medical community. Dr. Wang was enthusiastic about the possibility of collaboration, and together they developed a treatment plan that would allow Alex to share his expertise while staying within legal boundaries. But the real healing happened in the quiet moments they shared. Maya started helping Alex with his woodworking projects, learning to use tools that required precision and patience. Alex began joining Maya for her morning coffee, sharing stories about his life before the tragedy that ended his career. One evening, as they sat on Maya's porch watching the sunset, Alex turned to her with a serious expression. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Would you be interested in helping me start something new? A support program for people dealing with visible differences from injuries or medical conditions." Maya looked at him with interest. "What kind of program?" "Something that combines medical support with peer counseling. You understand what it's like to live with scars in a way that I, as a doctor, never could. Your perspective could help other people who are struggling with the same challenges." The idea excited Maya in a way she hadn't expected. For 3 years, she had focused on hiding from her scars and the changes they had brought to her life. But what if instead of hiding, she could help other people navigate similar challenges? "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." 6 months later, Maya stood in front of a group of 15 people in a community center meeting room. Some had burn scars like hers. Others had surgical scars or birthmarks or other conditions that made them feel different from the world around them. She wore a short-sleeved shirt and spoke without fear about her journey from hiding to healing. Alex sat in the back of the room, officially there as a medical consultant, but really there as the man who had helped Maya remember that scars could be beautiful, that healing didn't always mean returning to what you were before, and that sometimes the most profound transformations came from learning to love the parts of yourself you once wanted to hide. After the meeting, as they walked back to their cars, Maya touched Alex's arm gently. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For seeing me," Maya said simply. "For helping me see myself." Alex smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it hadn't for years. "Thank you for being brave enough to let me look." They drove back to the lake house in separate cars, but with the same understanding. They had both found something they hadn't known they were looking for. Not just healing, but purpose. Not just acceptance, but the courage to help others find their own path to wholeness. The lake reflected the stars that night, and in the distance 2 cabins glowed with warm light, home to 2 people who had learned that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come not from hiding our scars, but from learning to wear them like badges of survival, proof that we are stronger than the things that tried to break us.